Handheld consoles have slowly faded from relevance. Today we have consoles like the Nintendo Switch, or portable PCs like the Steam Deck, both of which are able to be played handheld or hooked up to a monitor and played like a normal console or computer. I do like this personally, but I can't pretend that I don't miss the golden era of handheld consoles. In the time where handhelds were behind the home consoles and found their own ways to stand out, or the ways they would use their unique gimmicks that wouldn't work with home consoles. There are far too many handhelds in the world for me to cover, so I'm only going to talk about the ones I own personally in the order that they released in, starting with the Sega GameGear, released in 1990. It's essentially a handheld version of the Sega Master System, the console that was made before the Mega Drive or Genesis. I love this bulky piece of shit. It's massive, it's got an incandescent light bulb inside to light up the screen, and thanks to that it needs 6 AA batteries. 6. That is wild, and you can feel it when you put in all the batteries. Man, it's a hefty boy. You can also charge it through the charge port on the top. The one I bought has been modded with a USB-C port, which is really convenient. There's a lot of handheld ports of Mega Drive games on here, though a lot of them are more like D-makes. They often have remixed ideas and levels from the main console versions, and a lot of the Sonic games I tried are a lot harder on here, but I appreciate this system. I completely understand why it lost to the Game Boy though. It's big, heavy, more expensive, and it doesn't have the same amount of third-party support. Still, it's a neat console. Next up we have this tiny thing. The NeoGeo Pocket Color is a gorgeous system. It's a color revision of the original NeoGeo Pocket, much like how the Game Boy did with the Game Boy Color. It's small, elegant, comfortable, and only needs 2 AA's, as well as a save data battery. The screen on mine was modded when I purchased it. It doesn't look this good normally. The original model did not have backlight. And this right here might look like a joystick, but it's actually closer to being like a tiny arcade stick with 4 switches underneath. Moving the clicky stick feels so satisfying. Even though you can only get 8 directions from it, it's very clear when you switch directions because of the little click it makes. It's very tactile. The buttons are nice and springy, and it just feels awesome. You can tell SNK knew what they were doing. What I love about this console is that a lot of the games are handheld D-makes of popular fighting games. I have a few here, like the Last Blade 2, Samurai Showdown 2, which is actually a D-make of the NeoGeo 64 arcade Samurai Showdown 64, and not of the game called Samurai Showdown 2. It's confusing, but still, it's a cool game. You have Fatal Fury, and I also have the 2 Metal Slug games. They're fun little side stories and play a lot like the arcade originals. There's also Ganbare Neopokekun, which is a game where you try to keep this little guy inside the console happy so he'll build minigames for you. And a bunch of weird random shit happens when you press different inputs. I love goofy stuff like this. The NeoGeo Pocket Color is an excellent console, a little on the expensive side to collect for, but I recommend checking out the games any way you can. Later in the same year we got the WonderSwan Color. Again, there was a non-color variant before it, but hey, I want me some color. The system is really small and slim. It feels super nice to hold. I was kind of surprised by how small it is. It only takes 1 battery, which just surprised me honestly. But of course it doesn't have a backlit screen, and I didn't get mine modded like the NeoGeo Pocket Color. This screen in particular is really hard to see. More so than I feel like is usual for systems like this. It might just be my console being a bit old and funky. Maybe it hasn't been stored in the best ways, I'm not sure. There's also really bad ghosting on this system. The system was made by Bandai and features a lot of Digimon games because of it. I've got 2 here. Digimon version WonderSwan, which is similar to the Sega Saturn game released before it. It's sort of an adaptation of the original Digimon handhelds. It looks nice, but this is one of the games that released before the color version of it came out. I also have Digimon Battle Spirits, a sort of platform fighter where you try to score more points than your opponent by beating them and collecting orbs. It's a decent game. And I also have SD Gundam Emotional Jam, a standard SD Gundam strategy game. This is a neat console I want to explore more. I just gotta find more games for it for a good price. I've only just started collecting it, so I don't really have much more to say. Oh man, here comes the big one, my favorite handheld console of all time, the Game Boy Advance. And for the first time on this channel, I actually have other people making this video with me. So please welcome my friend Nostalgia64.
Hey everybody, how's it going? So, the Game Boy Advance, one of the greatest systems of all time. I mean, this thing's just a fucking gem. It can play Game Boy games, the Game Boy Color games, of course, Game Boy Advance games. And it has a slice of everything. I mean, you got platformers, fighters, shooters. You can even handle 3D. I mean, hell, you could even watch cartoons on it. Obviously, it's going to be compressed to all hell, but it's viewable, I guess. Now, the main reason I bring up the Game Boy Advance is for, well, 2 reasons. It's a classic, and I have a lot of memories with it. I mean, on long road trips, I used to carry the Game Boy Advance and Super Mario Brothers 3, or I don't know, Yoshi's Island. Or another example, me and my whole family was at Home Depot and I was playing a Jimmy Neutron game on full fucking blast. Let's talk about gems. Now, like I said, the Game Boy Advance has a little bit of everything. Let's get started. Now, when it comes to standouts, I'm going to do a mix of games that stand out to me and games that are really underrated that I think you guys might like. So, the first game I want to bring up is Ed, Edd n Eddy, The Misadventures for the Game Boy Advance. Dog. I was at a GameStop with my dad in the early 2000s and they were showing a trailer for the Ed, Edd n Eddy game, and I really wanted that shit for the GameCube, but they only had it for the Game Boy Advance. And of course, I honestly played the shit out of it and I enjoyed it. And to be honest, it's honestly a decent platformer. You know, it's kind of a mixed-based gameplay. Obviously, Ed is a heavy set, so like if you want to break through shit, you could use Ed. Or if you want to be a lightweight, use Double D. You could like float and shit like Peach and Mario too. Or Ed if you just want to use projectiles. It still has the show's charm, and I fucking love that. Now this one is a couldn't. Fuck it. Now this game is pretty dope, but it is insufferably hard. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, this game has a lot of lore and it is very popular in Japan, but we don't got time for all that shit. Basically, you're in a very long spaceship and you gotta travel through these crevices to get to the end. And this game takes a lot to learn, as you can see by the gameplay. And honestly, even though it's hard, I honestly do like it a lot. Like once you reach the end, the feeling of success, like it feels fucking good once you beat a level. Now, when I said that the Game Boy Advance could push 3D, I really wasn't fucking around. So there's this European game called Asterix and Obelix. This game looks like an early PS1 game, and I don't know how that shit is running on the Game Boy Advance, but somehow it is. The game is a basic beat 'em up and it's pretty decent, but as you can see, the controls aren't really the best. Either way though, it's a decent game for what it is. Now, another game that pushes the Game Boy Advance, Super Monkey Ball Jr. It's basically the Super Monkey Ball games for the GameCube, but really compressed. And to be honest, the gameplay is pretty great. It's your average, Super Monkey Ball game. And I'm honestly surprised that the controls are really good. I mean, of course, there's still mini games. I don't know if there's multiplayer, but yeah, this game is fucking great. Now, last but certainly not least, Max Payne. It was a great game on the consoles, and it's a great game on the Game Boy Advance. Controls take some getting used to, but it's still the same game. There's still bullet time, there's still comic books, you can still take pills to heal. It's an overall decent game. But alright, ladies and gents, I think you had enough of me. I'll see you guys later. Peace.
And now it's my time to gush about the console. I prefer the original form factor over the later SP models, but I did get an IPS screen mod because, of course, this console looks so nice. It's small, comfortable, and has one of the best libraries for a handheld console I know. And thanks to its backwards compatibility, I use it for all my Game Boy playing needs. My collection just grows and grows and has no intention of stopping. I got more into Pokemon in the last few years, and finally having my own copies of some of these games feels so great, since sadly they're not getting any cheaper, at least anytime soon. Pokemon Yellow was a delight to play through, and Emerald is either my favorite or second favorite Pokemon game. The Sonic games for this system are crazy. The Advanced Trilogy is some of my all-time favorite Sonic experiences, with the second one being my absolute favorite for its insane speed. There's also the Hamtaro games I covered. I recently got the Metabots games. There's just so much. This console is a gift that keeps on giving, and for the most part it's not too hard to collect for. Most of the games are not that expensive, but there are some outliers that will cost you a pretty penny. I also remember I got games from my family in Spain. One of them was a Fairly OddParents game where you had to write down passwords and you couldn't save, and the other was Mario Advance Super Mario World. This game was awesome, and it's also fake, and it stopped saving at some point. The label is just really strange. When I opened up the game, there was a small piece of paper inside of it. When I removed the paper, the board inside of the cart was just rattling around, so I guess that was their cheap way to try to prevent that issue. I guess they didn't size the plastic molds right, I used to play it on the original Nintendo DS, which my buddy NoMooreMercy is here to tell you more about.
I have nothing but positive memories of the Nintendo DS. My story with the DS was supposed to begin on Christmas Day 2004, but I had other plans. Just a little backstory, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, so my mom would buy us Christmas gifts throughout the year and she would hide them. So she would always hide them in the same spot, and we had never taken anything from that spot in the past, so maybe she thought we just didn't know about it or something. But jokes on her though, I knew exactly about that spot, and I had just been waiting for my chance to strike, something that I absolutely wanted and needed. And you know, I was a good kid mostly, but I was absolutely ravenous for the DS. I knew she had bought the silver original DS, the one with the Metroid Prime Hunters demo bundled inside, and she had bought copies of Super Mario 64 DS and Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. So one night I decided to sneak into a room while my parents were out and I nabbed it. I'd play it when they were out and late at night, hiding it under my pillow whenever she came into the room, and for a little bit it worked. It really did. But I made one crucial mistake. My mistake was not leaving the box in the closet. I just really liked that Nintendo DS box. I don't know, what can I say? So I guess one day, this is kind of blurry for me, but I guess one day she noticed the box was gone out of the closet and she took it back from me. Angry and all enraged that I did that. But you know what? It was absolutely worth it. In just those few days, I was collecting stars on Mario 64 DS, like I was playing the first game for the first time again. I could play one of my favorite games on the go. That's incredible. And not only that, it was enhanced. I could finally play as Luigi, as Wario, as Yoshi. The game, if anything, cemented my love for Mario 64 even more. It was so familiar yet different. It was like a remix version or like a ROM hack or something like that. I have fond memories of playing the game with my friends on the bus and screwing around in PictoChat too. The touchscreen was so cool, and nothing I owned up until that point even had a touchscreen. I thought it was like this crazy future technology. Throughout the years, I had plenty of great DS games. Advance Wars Dual Strike remains my favorite Advance Wars game, even if the whole dual strike mechanic is just beyond broken, right? New Super Mario Bros. Was really fun. I had Ultimate Mortal Kombat DS, which had puzzle combat from Mortal Kombat Deception. Basically, it was Tetris, but with chibi Mortal Kombat characters. Really addictive. I think I played it more than I played the main game, to be honest. I had Guilty Gear DS, which was my introduction to the series. I thought it was so cool there were characters named after my favorite rock stars, like Axl Rose, and metal bands like Slayer. Resident Evil DS was pretty much an enhanced version of the original PS1 Resident Evil with goofy touch controls shoehorned in. Star Fox Command is still one of the best Star Fox games ever made, and I stand by that. Same goes for Mario Kart DS and WarioWare Touched. I loved the original DS, so much so I never upgraded from that original silver one. Eventually I did get older and the 360 with Xbox Live took up most of my time. The DS just wasn't as social. It had online functionalities and all that, but all of those friends I gamed with before got a PS3 or a 360 and I just didn't play it anymore. But for the first few years, I loved the DS more than any other handheld I had up until that point. Looking back on it, the DS is still my most played handheld ever and easily my favorite.
My memories of the Nintendo DS all started with this, the console bundle that came with Nintendogs. Man, if you want to talk about cozy games, it doesn't get much cozier than this. The music and every single part of the game's visuals, from the UI to the dogs themselves, it's all just pure nostalgia to me. I remember when I had friends over as a kid, I had a bunk bed back then, and I'd be in the bottom bunk and my friend would be in the top bunk, and we'd just send stupid drawings to each other in PictoChat, or we'd write stupid messages that were just random and made no sense, and we'd just try to make each other laugh. The DS also has my favorite Animal Crossing game, Wild World. It's got dialogue that's almost as funny as the GameCube one, but with more rooms in your house to customize and way more dialogue options and things to say to your villagers. I also love the low poly look for this game. The Pokemon game for this system that just might beat Emerald for being my favorite is Platinum. I know people love Black and White, I just haven't gotten to them yet. Platinum fixed a lot of the speed issues that Diamond and Pearl had. Although not completely, it's good enough for me. It's a massive game and added a lot of my favorite Pokemon to the franchise, like Garchomp. I just love the environments, the music, just yes. Of course, one of my most vivid memories of the system early on was playing WarioWare Touched at a demo kiosk in Oslo. I was obsessed with it, and when we finally got the game, I just fell in love with the series. I own every game in the franchise minus the Wii U one, and it just goes so hard. Fast-paced micro games with great music and a wacky sense of humor. There's something rhythmic about this series, which makes sense since they made Rhythm Heaven as well. I adore it. I did have a PlayStation Portable once upon a time. I played played Daxter on it, and all I remember was that he was horny and it made me uncomfortable as a kid. There was also an Indiana Jones game, but I can't remember much. I got a Transformers game, and when I updated it, it just like froze mid-update, and we didn't know what to do, so we turned the console off, and that bricked it, and eventually we just gave it all away. So yeah, my PSP memories are not the most interesting, I'm sad to say, but I wanted to give it a shout out because it was a cool system. It really was like a handheld PS2, and it just blew people's minds at the time. I just wish mine didn't break, but it was probably more our fault than anything. The PS Vita, however, I played a lot more. I know people give this console crap for having a small library of first-party titles from large publishers, but the thing is, this console was more than that. It was not only an indie game machine, but it also emulated PS1, 2, and PSP games, and it did a great job at it too. This is actually how I first played Silent Hill and Metal Gear Solid, before I got them physically. It's a solid system and easy to mod. Well, there's one hiccup. Those stupid proprietary memory cards. These suckers were expensive when they came out, and they are even more expensive today. Thankfully, there are ways to use an SD card instead, but the only method I know forces you to sacrifice the game card slot to do so, which is a shame. Still, it's a solid system that can do a lot of stuff, and it feels and looks great. Then the 3DS. Man, I was so excited for this console's launch. My sister got the Aqua Blue model, which is absolutely gorgeous. That color is just awesome. In fact, all the launch colors look amazing. I remember watching the Zelda Ocarina of Time ads over and over again. Robin Williams' performance was so endearing, and all the fun ads showing what it would feel like to play with the 3D turned on. And I remember playing Face Raiders and uploading silly images and fighting against them. It was awesome. I still remember how blown away I was by the 3D, and to me it's more than just a gimmick. Of course, the original model was sort of picky with the 3D's viewing angles, which is why I way prefer playing on my new 3DS XL model. The front-facing camera tracks your head and shifts the viewing angles of the 3D, making it really a non-issue, and I love that added depth. It's just so much fun to see. The circle pad adds a lot to this system. It's a really smart way to add 360 degrees of analog movement while keeping it compact, and the new 3DS consoles add that little C-stick and the extra buttons on the back. This system has a great library of games. WarioWare Gold is an amazing compilation of microgames from across the entire franchise, and it's one of the few times we get to hear Charles Martinet read full lines of dialogue as his Mario characters. Well, Mario here, but still. Animal Crossing New Leaf is a fan favorite, and it's also the first Animal Crossing game I ever played. I didn't own my own save, I just was a regular citizen in my sister's town, but it was still neat. Also, I really like Mario 3D Land. I know it's seen as kind of a basic Mario game, but I love the way it looks and feels. It's a fun and satisfying Mario experience. It's a light and snappy game that feels classic and fresh at the same time. Eventually I got Majora's Mask for the console, sometime after I'd beaten the N64 original, and I added a fan mod that improved some aspects of the gameplay. Of course, to do that I had to mod the system, which was a fairly easy process, it just takes some time. Now I can play games from any region. See, most handhelds like Game Boys and the NeoGeo and GameGear and WonderSwan, they're almost always region free. Even the original DS was region free, but for some stupid reason, they added region lock to the 3DS. But with some simple homebrew software, you can remove that restriction. I also added emulators for the NES, SNES, Game Boy Color Advanced, PC Engine, WonderSwan, NeoGeo Pocket Color, GameGear, Master System, Mega Drive, Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1, Virtual Boy, and even the Pokemon Mini has an emulator, which was a tiny handheld with a small library of games. The cool thing about the Virtual Boy emulator is that now I can finally play games from the system without having to get that massive and clunky headset that didn't even release in Europe. And the 3D works perfectly, so you're able to experience the games more or less how they were intended to. And of course, since the 3DS is natively backwards compatible with the original DS, this console can play an insane amount of games. When playing original DS games on a 3DS, the resolutions don't entirely match up, and the picture will either be zoomed in and blurry or zoomed out and small. But there are fan-made tools to remedy this, and you can make DS games look really good on the 3DS. If I travel, this is the console I'm bringing with me. It's got so much stuff from so many consoles jam-packed in here. So many of the games I own I've loaded onto this thing, and it's so cool. There are still third-party handhelds being made today, ones that can physically play cartridges from your collection, and ones that just boot them off of an SD card. But outside of these, it seems like standalone handheld systems are a thing of the past. Maybe I'm wrong, but outside of retro machines and nostalgic throwbacks, I think most handhelds now will be PCs, and that's fine. But I'd love to see companies have another crack at this style of console. That's all I got for you this time, thanks for watching.